Can yet again the UCLA defense be a strength for the Bruins in Week 3 against Indiana?
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for your support. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel, from now until September 22nd, is offering all customers for FanDuel by betting $5 and getting a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Where we get started today is the fact that this UCLA team is heading into an uncertain matchup, which I'm somewhat shocked to say, but that is very much the case heading into Indiana. And two of the more unlikely sources are the strengths of this team so far, right? You've got the UCLA defense versus the Indiana offense. UCLA's defense, I thought, played pretty well against Hawaii, and Indiana so far has scored 15 touchdowns in 2 games and allowed 1. So until the offense figures it out, I'm not asking the defense to be like 2023 levels when they had elite pass rushing, they had talented guys who left in the secondary. This is a team that's patched together on the defensive side. And if you looked at the Pro Football Focus preseason prediction, what was their biggest projected weakness? It was the defense. This UCLA team is not and is supposed to not have a quality defense that can literally walk and chew, whatever it's supposed to be, right? That's not been the case because there's been holdovers in the linebacker room. Interior defensive line has been built up through the portal from a couple years ago, a season ago, and the Bruins are just rolling guys off the edge to see who can stick, and they're just getting healthier depth-wise for edge rushing, maybe teasing with an Oladejo, with a Medrano, and so far the secondary played well, forcing quite a few turnovers, getting a couple of picks in that first game, which leads me to the beginning of this defense. They need to be not spectacular, but they need to be good. If they're not good, it will be a little bit scary for UCLA because it's still a question mark about what Ethan Garbers and Eric Bieniemy are going to do offensively. I thought this team would be led offensively, but after week 1, the core and the structure of last year's defense from D'Anton Lynn is still there, right? Somewhat of the identity without the face. The identity internally at its core, what they're trying to run was still somewhat there with Akaka Malloy as they did their best. And the only touchdown drive the Bruins gave up, remember, was because UCLA failed on special teams to sub, and they didn't call a timeout. And then Braden Shager went down and completed all his passes to lead for a touchdown drive. The Bruins had gotten a 3-and-out. So large in part, they could have played that whole game without being down in the first quarter. And the defense didn't truly give up a sustained drive other than the fact that the punter ran for 20 yards, which is like the biggest play of the day. They made repeated plays in that game against Hawaii. And now I think they're going to be asked to do quite a bit in the home opener, in the Big Ten opener against Indiana. And we'll do a little bit more about what is expected from Indiana. But remember, this is what UCLA did against Hawaii, pulling up some of the numbers in this game as we speak. Against Hawaii, UCLA, they're not supposed to be able to get any pressure this year. UCLA is not supposed to be able to get the pressure. Well, in this first game, UCLA, remember, had a total of 5 sacks. The Bruins were able to get to the backfield, and then overall with 5 sacks, 11 tackles for loss, and 7 passes defended in this one, and still forced a total of 2 picks, forced a fumble with the game on the line, and made sure that as much as UCLA starting quarterback didn't have a good QBR, Braden Shager had a worse QBR than Garbers, and Garbers barely completed 50% of his passes and still had 2 picks. All right? That is what they still were only allowed from Braden Shager. Not a good QBR. UCLA only allowed 50 yards rushing, about a yard and a half per carry. They got pressure in the backfield against a run and shoot offense that's supposed to be rather tough to defend, be a nightmare to gamble. UCLA brought pressure in the right time. And Hawaii is not a team that's going to be built on running the football, although Shager is a dual threat guy. He was banged up. For Hawaii, UCLA brought pressure against a team it's tough to bring pressure against because of the style they run. They shut down the run. And then they were able to make plays on the football, repeated plays. And they forced another fumble that was not recovered. Blocked a field goal that still somehow got through the uprights. So the defense has the moxie. They've proven, I think, that they can compete with this Indiana team. Now, they just got to go out and execute in this game, right? It's going to be up a little bit to these edge rushers. Whether we see some guys like, will Sharif Say be ready to go in this game, or is it going to be on the edge where for UCLA, they're led tackles by Schlesinger. You had Medrano, Cajo make a big play. He had a sack in that game. Not a lot of the sacks did come from the D-line in week one. So how much can the D-line generate pressure off the edge in this game? I'm not going to ask the world of Tawia and Keanu Williams to do everything. The edges, whoever is rotated in by Ikaika Malloy, I hope can have a big game in this game because they need to. They need to generate pressure against Curtis Rourke, who is yet to throw a pick in this season. Indiana is yet to turn over the ball. The worst thing Indiana's done, I think, in the first 2 weeks was have a couple penalties that probably did not make their coach happy in Curt Cignetti against Florida International. But turn over the ball? Absolutely not. 15 touchdowns? Absolutely for the Hoosiers. That's why they're confident. A confident, cocky head coach that's saying, we're going to go into an old freaking stadium and kick their butts, regardless of the opponent. We'll play in a parking lot if we have to. That is the type of moxie this team is coming up with, physical smash-mouth football, and I'll tell you those numbers next. But this is a unit for UCLA that is not supposed to be the leading unit, and through a week and a bye, I'm leaning on UCLA's chances in this game. Yes, the offense has to be much better to win, but to keep them in it, to have a good chance to win it, the defense has to play good. They need to play good. And if they play good again against Indiana, then we can start hoping that if the offense figures it out, UCLA might have a chance at a bowling season if everything starts to go into formation. But now it's up to UCLA continuing to hope their transfers in the secondary keep it going. The two corners between Kirkwood and Davies hold down the fort. And while I'm leaning a lot on this linebacker room, I'm not sure how much depth it has beyond the starters. The Bruins have guys there to make plays, and they did week one. It's up to the edge rushers to make a lot of plays. Now let's talk segment 2 about what are the cast of characters Indiana's bringing, right? Because Curt Cignetti brought quite a few transfers over for this Hoosier team, some from James Madison, his previous stop, some guys who have been around in college football forever, players of the year in their conference. And this is a team that is averaging over 550 yards of offense, all right? They are balanced beyond balance. You think of Thanos balancing the finger, right? The balance, right? That is what they're doing right now. So we'll talk about that next on Locked On UCLA. Fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. You can meet your wellness goals with chef-crafted meals, options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto, all with Factor's fresh, never frozen meals that are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. You're sitting there getting ready for the UCLA game. You're ready to watch all the college football games. Those meals, they are nutritious, great tasting, and they're ready to make in 2 minutes. I think that's the great thing you need to do if you're like, man, I don't have my options to go watch a game. Let's go eat some Factor meals. 35 different meals you can choose from to kickstart a new healthy routine. From breakfast to dessert, stay fueled with these easy nutritious options. All you got to do is choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage the calories, maximize protein intake, and more. Head to factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 and use the code LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next box. That's code LockedOnCollege50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. All right, I've talked a lot about FanDuel You know the Bruins aren't favored. They're underdogs at home by 3 points at least, whether you get the line at 2.5, 3, or 3.5, whether that moves before the game. The Bruins are pretty much trailing and down in this game by a field goal. So what are you going to hit on FanDuel? Go check it out. It's America's #1 sports book. But here we go. A kicker for you guys. From now until September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then all you need is a YouTube TV base plan. You can watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form payment and you can cancel anytime. But if that is not enough, be sure to check out FanDuel's Profit Boost in the app. Use it for FanDuel's double your winnings for all of Sunday, September 15th, pre-game moneyline bets. Profit Boost will be live starting September 12th. Visit your account page and learn more about your boost. Visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right. Here we go. Second segment. Let's talk UCLA defense against this very vaunted Indiana offense. They're averaging close to 550 yards a game, if not a little more. They're about a very balanced offense, both over 250 yards passing and running the football. And they just pretty much ran it down Western Illinois' throat in week 2, a team that was severely overmatched. But again, all the numbers and all the records, when everybody's pointing to, is the fact that Indiana scored its most points, broke its school record for scoring in a game since like 1901 when they won 76-0. In this game, Curt Cignetti's squad, 77-3. Dominant. This is what the numbers were these last couple of weeks for Indiana. 330 yards against Western Illinois. They ran the ball 47 times. They dominated so much. Their starting quarterback, Curtis Rourke, he didn't need to throw it. He just did not need to throw it. So they ran it, and they scored 7 touchdowns on the ground. 7. And they still threw for 3 more touchdowns and 378 in the air. And Rourke didn't have to do the majority of that. Oh, yeah, what was that week 1? 180 and a touchdown, 230 on the ground and 3 touchdowns. Indiana is wanting to, at least in the moment, run the football. Maybe a bit more exaggerated after those week 2 numbers, but they threw the ball all over the field. And Rourke, a former MAC Player of the Year at Ohio offensively in 2022, he's a longtime super senior, joining other super seniors in the portal to come to Indiana to begin this vision for Curt Cignetti's Indiana Hoosiers. All right? Guys who are ready to ball, ready to change the narrative for this Indiana team, and UCLA better be ready. I was reading about what Pro Football Focus thought the weakness for this Indiana team is. Why do you think I harp so much about UCLA's D-line? Possibly what was expected to be the weakest link of the UCLA defense, the edge rushing, because Indiana, you read Pro Football Focus, coming into the game, coming into this season, the projected weakness is their offensive line. And some of the guys coming over were former James Madison Dukes, as Cignetti is trying to piece together an offensive line. And things, change. Week 1, week 2, week 3 injuries, right? Off-season and everything. But heading into the season, a supposed weak link was their offensive line. Now, coming in to week 3, Indiana has only allowed 2 sacks. And that was in game 1. 2 sacks, which is not a terrible number, but 2 sacks through 2 weeks means they kept their quarterback upright, out of harm's way. UCLA last year could not do that against North Carolina Central. They could not keep their quarterback out of harm's way when they were throwing the ball and still let their quarterbacks take a couple of free shots. So even though it's Western Illinois, UCLA still last year in their game against an FCS and HBCU team, the Bruins still, with the bad offensive line that allowed so many sacks, they let their quarterback get a couple of free runs. And there's sometimes the defensive coordinator, depending on how good the team is, regardless of the level, can get a free run at the quarterback. Indiana, no. They kept their act clean. They looked pristine, and they were very sharp in this game against Western Illinois. They could run the football, and so far, Indiana, you try to figure out what are they doing? What can they do for their offense so far? Well, they haven't thrown an interception. They have not fumbled the ball. They haven't had a fumble forced on them, all right? They haven't done that. And the opponents have only had a couple of quarterback hurries, so pressure has not been a real issue for this Indiana team, all right? for their starting quarterback in Curtis Rourke, it all starts with getting him under duress. See what he looks like, right? He is completing 73% of his passes, and he's only thrown 41 passes in his first 2 games. 448 yards, 3 touchdowns with a long of 71 yards. That's good for 224 yards, right? Not outstanding numbers, but he hasn't had to do anything because they've dominated and kicked everybody's butt. Now, what UCLA needs to do is get him under duress and force Rourke to win this game. All right? Offensively, what UCLA wants to do, as much as we want to see Garbers improve week 1 to week 3 with better play calling, hit the receivers, we want to see them establish the run game. And a lot of these Big Ten games will be won, or a good chunk of the game will be dominated by teams who can establish the run. All right? Everybody looks at Ohio State as a gold standard in the Big Ten. You watch the Locked On Big Ten squad. It's basically the running joke, at least for the rest of the show, that Ohio State is going to win this conference going away, considering Oregon hasn't done a lot lately. Well, what can those teams do? They can protect the quarterback, and they can run the football. Whether it's a Chip Kelly-style running game, whether it's Dan Lanning's physicality, going to the rest of the Big Ten, Michigan won a national championship running the football. A lot of the Big Ten games will be the ability to handle the physicality. And Indiana's been able to out-muscle, out-tussle these opponents before, and I don't think they'll be able to do that with UCLA. There's still a tough core to this team, a toughness that was established last year with Danton Lynn that won't go away with the Malloy's defense. And these are a lot of guys coming from different places wanting to prove, and here are the doubters for myself and a lot of the national pundits, that this defense is going to suck, and they came out week 1 and played pretty good. All right? And I'd like to believe Hawaii is hopefully better than the 2 opponents Indiana has played, between Florida International and definitely Western Illinois. That remains to be seen. I know FIU got a big dub afterwards, and Hawaii's only win was a struggle against Delaware State in week 0 in terrible weather. What UCLA is dealing with is a team that has a quarterback that has completed a high percentage of passes, has not faced a lot of pressure, a running back room between Justice Ellison, Tyson Lawton, and Elijah Green, who between their 2 games have split the carries not evenly, but fairly close proportionally, and all have over 100 yards to their name through 2 games, 56 yards a game, 56 yards a game, and almost 100 yards a game for Justice Ellison through 2 games. So it's a 3-headed beast. While there's a 7th year in there's a bunch of guys who've been around. It's not exactly just one guy when you've got a lead back averaging 10 yards a carry, and when your worst back is averaging more than 5 yards a carry. That is a running game that is dominated and will thrive on punching you in the mouth and going straight at you and making sure you have to stop them. It's not going to be the same as the run and shoot. UCLA will have to muscle up and play good, and this is where I think Tawia and Williams, the former Duck, I don't want to say it, but the former Trojan and Tawia, but he's been with the Bruins for so long, was a huge keep in the portal after he withdrew. This is where those guys can make their money in this game. And as long as the edge guys can keep contained, I'm not sure we're going to see Rourke take off in this game. We'll talk a little bit more. I think I'm going to do a crossover with Jacob Goins, and we'll talk a little more about this in general. But UCLA needs to generate pressure, and this is a good game for the interior defensive line to remind everybody that there is still a strength on the D-line. It's just not where it was overall last year, specifically on the edge, getting pressure to the quarterback, keeping contained, and still making plays when the quarterback was scrambling down the field. All right? Just because there's not a lot to in this game does not mean the D-line is completely terrible, and it does not mean that there will still be a strength in this game when what's supposed to be both teams' weaknesses is turning out in very, very limited supply to be their strength. And we'll talk about a couple more keys in detail next for this game. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. It helps you find those professionals you can't find anywhere else, because there's even those who are on the site that aren't necessarily looking for another job, but might be open to the perfect role. Over 70% of LinkedIn users in a given month don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. All right. So check out LinkedIn Jobs. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Again, that's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, here we go, wrapping things up on the Locked On UCLA podcast today. We're talking UCLA, Indiana, specifically in this matchup. What are we going to get things done talking Bruins, Hoosiers, the UCLA defense versus the Indiana offense? Can the Bruins win the home opener like I think they should be favored, but the week one eye test, the week one scoreboard is not going to come out and press you more than a team that's drubbed opponents 15 touchdowns to 1. 0 turnovers, 2 sacks allowed while forcing turnovers, getting 10 sacks. The worst part of week one for Indiana, I believe, was penalties, and then they fixed that much better in week two. A quarterback that's completing a lot of his passes, an O-line that's playing better than expected, a three-headed monster in the running back room, receivers who have made their catches so far. What does UCLA need to do? Well, these are like broader benchmarks than specific keys to the game that I will give in the next Locked On UCLA episode, I'd like to believe. But if that doesn't happen, here we go. For UCLA, 1, keep Indiana closer, if not under, to 150 yards rushing. You would think if a team ran for 150 yards on you on the ground, you probably got burned, like legitimately burned on the ground. Well, looking at these numbers from week 1 to week 2 for Indiana, this team was just dominant on the ground. 230 plus versus Florida International, 320 plus against Western Illinois. So for UCLA to keep them closer to under 150, it means, 1, they can't just completely burn the clock, and they're going to have to throw the ball a little more. All right, maybe it's a big sustained drive. Maybe it's one big run or something. But under 150, then UCLA, I think, will be in this game. If it's under 150, UCLA, the defense is handling the physicality. Now, this certainly can be said for if they keep it under 100, closer to 100. The closer to 100, the better. But at the moment, UCLA is trying to keep this team, this Hoosier team that can run the ball, less than 70 yards under their average. That's a big ask already. Now, if the offensive line or the defensive line is having their way, that number might increase or decrease, and that will sway the win probability, the percentage. Whoever wins this game will be defined by the offensive and defensive lines on both sides. For me, I think UCLA's D-line might be a little bit better, hopefully, than the Indiana D-line, but I also think UCLA's O-line has looked much worse than what Indiana's O-line has done in their first 2 weeks. All right? Now, closer or less than 150 yards rushing. The next thing, I've already mentioned it, you have to get pressure on the quarterback. They have to get to Curtis Rourke. 3 sacks by this D-line, all right? Not just 3 sacks overall. UCLA had to use different pressures, get linebackers. They had to get set guys from the secondary to get pressure on Shager. I'd like to see 3 sacks from the D-line. Now, if they get 3 to 4 sacks overall, good. But I want to see the D-line shred the O-line. I want to see them win battles up front and get to Rourke, which leads me to the third key. The secondary were ball hawks in game 1. I just said force a turnover. UCLA needed 3, and they forced a fumble where they did not recover it. So UCLA was +1 in the turnover battle in a game they desperately needed it to, or else they would have been down a lot more points. And they failed to capitalize on the big stops the defense got in week 1. In this game, UCLA gets Indiana. Not just 1, they need to force multiple turnovers. That's what the defense needs. Unless the offense is having their way and the defense is getting third down stops consistently, I think Indiana is still going to be able to move the ball. Now, to stop those drives, to bend and not break, you have to rip the football away, get a tipped pick, whatever it is. They need 2 takeaways to rob Indiana of potential points and shift the momentum the other way, and that can lead UCLA to victory, especially on the defensive side of the football. So again, under 150, close to that, get in the backfield, which can lead to more interceptions, forced fumbles, more misgivings by Indiana than they faced in the first 2 weeks of the season. For a hungry team that is a dark horse. Both these teams like dark horses for teams that can go on a good winning streak in the Big Ten with bowl seasons. But Indiana has the more favorable schedule, the more confident, loud, braggadocious head coach. Well, you've got the quiet Deshaun Foster and hopefully a team that's still hiding on the sideline, waiting to prove they're still to be reckoned with. And if they hit those benchmarks, 2 out of 3, UCLA probably has done enough defensively, more than enough defensively in my book, to win this game. Especially if you get 2 and 3, they should win that game if they're getting pressure on their quarterback and forcing turnovers, even if Indiana's running the ball. Now, if they stop the run, if they're getting pressure, they're not forcing turnovers, they probably don't need them. That is how it's going to go. So I expect a fun game. Get your hands up, Bruins fans. It's 8 clap time, baby. Stay tuned for a crossover with myself and the Locked On Hoosiers host, Jacob Goins. I'll have another little keys to the game episode overall. Stay tuned for all the content and the reaction here on Locked On UCLA after the game. Hands up, 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.